Hi, and welcome to HRM 140, Part 4, Chapter 16. In this lecture, we will begin our discussion on the service of food and alcohol, which inevitably subjects hotels to additional risks and increases the number of regulations of which the hospitality manager must be keenly aware. As you will read in your text, every state has restrictions on the service of alcohol and regulations governing the handling of service of food. And for good reason. Handled improperly, food can make guests sick or even in rare cases cause death. Alcohol, handled improperly, exposes not only your guests to danger, but also those with whom your guest might interact. It's extremely important that when dealing with food and alcohol sales, you are intimately familiar with your state and city regulations. I'll tell you up front, our coverage of these topics in Part 4 will be cursory at best. An in-depth review of the myriad regulations involved is simply beyond the scope of this course. To start our review today, we will cover general laws regarding food. Our competencies for today include the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or FDCA, local health regulations, and other theories and forms of liability owners and managers may be subject to with regard to food handling. Let's start with the federal law. In pertinent part, the FDCA reads, "The alteration, mutilation, destruction, obliteration, or removal of the whole or any part of the labeling of, or the doing of any act with respect to food, if such act is done while such article is held for sale, whether or not the first sale, after shipment in interstate commerce, and results in such article being adulterated or misbranded." You might wonder at first how this applies to you at the retail end of the food distribution chain. The fact is that courts have consistently held hotels and restaurants to this standard in order to protect the consumer by positing that the retail establishment in serving to the ultimate consumer is involved in interstate commerce. This is important to us because the Act goes on to define adulterated food in Section 342. As food that, quote, has been prepared, packed, or held under insanitary conditions, whereby it may have become contaminated with filth. So, when taken in context of the laws which most of you are probably more familiar with, that is the state and local health regulations, this should start to make sense now. Now, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time going over state and local health regulations in this class. To be sure, in your course of study here at Coastal, you'll have an in-depth review of those regulations from the experts, and may even have a chance to be certified. I will just assume that we are all generally familiar with the county health department and the role they play in ensuring consumer safety through periodic inspections of food preparation and service establishments. So again, when you take the function of your local health department into account and recognize that they are looking for situations which might cause food to become adulterated, you can see how that bootstraps into the FDCA provisions we spoke of earlier. So now that you understand the general context of the laws to which you may be subject, let's talk about the potential consequences of violating the various federal, state, and local regulations. It probably goes without saying that operators can be held liable under certain circumstances if customers get sick from the food they are served. What we'll cover next is the legal mechanisms or theories that might allow a customer to recover damages in such a situation. Generally speaking, there are two theories under which an operator may be held liable and a customer may recover. Both of these should sound familiar, as we have touched on the foundation aspects of each of these theories earlier in the semester. The first is a general theory of tort, and the second is under a theory of contract. So let's briefly cover both. First, tort law. Here, the injured customer may rely on a theory of negligence or possibly even strict liability. Remember the tort theory of negligence and the four elements necessary for a case to prevail: duty, breach, causation, and damages. Let's walk through an example. Say, for instance, that you are maintaining a kitchen that hasn't passed a health inspection because of unsanitary conditions. Say also that you serve a customer food from that kitchen and they get terribly sick and spend time in serious pain and in the hospital. Ultimately, they sue you for negligence. The analysis would go something like this. First, what is your duty? Remember, we said that our duty is generally to act in such a way so as not to injure our guests. Stated in a more specific way for this scenario, we might say that the duty is to maintain a clean and safe food preparation area that complies with the local health department regulations. Next, we would analyze whether you breached that duty. Under either of the suggested definitions of duty above, it seems clear that there was a breach and that your kitchen wasn't clean and it didn't pass inspection. Third, we look at causation. Remember that breach of the duty must be the cause of the damages. If, in this case, the customer can prove that they were made sick because of the unsanitary conditions of the kitchen, they have met this burden. I hope it is obvious that this will be the most difficult hurdle for the customer, as they must prove through scientific data some nexus between the unsanitary conditions and their illness. If they cannot do so, the claim will not stand. Finally, we'd look at damages. If the first three elements are satisfied, the customer would bring in evidence that they have hospital charges, lost wages, pain, suffering, etc. as proof of their damages. And that, in a nutshell, is the overview of a liability under a theory of tort. Additional examples are provided in your text, including the case of McGavin versus Morrison Cafeteria, where the plaintiff was made sick by an unwholesome shrimp salad, and another case involving a hotel owned by Donald Trump. Under the less common theory of strict liability, the restaurant is seen as an insurer or a guarantor of the product and that it is safe. Therefore, the restaurant is held strictly liable for injuries caused by their products. Next, we're going to look at contract liability. As we know from our study of the topic earlier in the semester, sales contracts often involve warranties as to the products being sold. In essence, food is a product being sold, and we have already discussed in detail how the sale of food constitutes an implied contract. Warranties, much like contracts, come in two forms, express and implied. Express warranties are those provided orally or in writing. Implied warranties are imposed by law on the sale unless the seller negates or limits them in some way. Generally speaking, if the seller is a merchant with respect to the kinds of good being sold, a warranty that the good shall be merchantable is implied in the contract for sale. So by extension, a restaurant is a merchant with regards to the food, and therefore subject to an implied at-law warranty that the goods, in this case the food, is merchantable. As we see in the case of Levy v. Paul, including in your text, merchantable means that the food is wholesome and fit for human consumption. And so the theory follows that if the food is not fit for human consumption and makes the customer sick, the restaurant has breached the warranty of merchantability and is therefore liable for the damage to the consumer. This, by the way, is generally both true under common law and under statutory law, or in this case, the Uniform Commercial Code. So that covers the major laws and theories we need to discuss for this chapter. We'll continue our discussion in Chapter 17. I hope if you have any questions, you won't hesitate to reach out to me. Until then, have a great day.